Let's talk about training your team. For a lot of companies, it's just a box you have to tick, right? A necessary chore. Well, today, we're going to flip that idea on its head. We're going to see how the smartest companies in the world use training not just to teach someone a task, but as this incredibly powerful tool for survival, for growth, and sometimes for a complete transformation. All right, let's get into it.
So to really get a feel for how high the stakes can be, let's start with a true giant, AT&T. I mean, for 100 years, they were the phone company, a totally stable, predictable, massive institution. But then, well, the world changed, and suddenly AT&T was staring down this terrifying question. How do you stop a century-old company from becoming a fossil?
And this quote right here, it just nails the problem. This isn't just about buying new technology, it's about people. You've got a workforce the size of a city full of people who are hired for an analog world, and now they have to thrive in a digital one. So what do? I mean, that was the monumental company-defining challenge they were up against.
And that tees up our first big idea, the race to reskill. What AT&T did wasn't just some simple training program. No, this was a radical, company-wide pivot for its very survival.
The sheer scale of this change is what's so mind-blowing. Think about it. In the year 2000, software was basically a rounding error for AT&T, but they projected that by 2020, it would be 3/4 of their entire business. That's not a shift, that's a revolution. The old skills weren't just getting outdated, they were becoming totally irrelevant, fast.
So how in the world did they tackle this? They launched a massive, super structured program called Workforce 2020, and it was built on 3 key pillars. First up, they had to figure out the exact skills they were going to need in the future and, see how big the gap was from where they were. Then, they gave employees all the tools to fill those gaps, everything from online courses to these really focused nano degrees. And finally, and this is crucial, they measured everything. Not just if people finished a course, but did it lead to a promotion? Did it actually improve the business? It was a clear, strategic, all-in approach.
Okay, so AT&T's story is a masterclass in retraining your current team. But an employee's whole development journey, that starts way earlier. It literally begins on day 1. We're talking about onboarding, which as you'll see is so much more than just a welcome mat.
So when we talk about onboarding, it's really a 2-part deal. Of course, there's the practical stuff, right? Here's your login, there's the coffee machine. But look at that second half, helping them become emotionally attached to and engaged in the firm. That's the game changer. It's about creating a real sense of belonging, not just checking off a list of administrative tasks.
So what does a really good onboarding program actually do? Well, it absolutely nails these 4 things. Making someone feel welcome? That's table stakes. Giving them the basic info to do their job? Obviously. But the real magic, the part that creates loyalty, happens in goals 3 and 4. Helping them understand the company's bigger story and, actually socializing them into the firm's unique way of doing things, its culture. That's where you build real commitment.
So how long do you think this takes? A few hours? A day? Maybe a week? Well, get this. At the cosmetics giant L'Oreal, their onboarding program lasts for 2 full years. That's right, 2 years of mentoring, special projects, and site visits, all designed to weave a new person into the fabric of their culture. It just goes to show how seriously some companies take this.
And for a more intense, front-loaded approach, check out Toyota. New hires there go through a 4-day deep dive. It is a total immersion into the Toyota way of thinking. And look at what they focus on. Mutual respect, teamwork, problem solving. They're not just teaching a job. They are building a Toyota employee from the ground up, embedding the core values that make them who they are.
All right, so we've welcomed our new folks. But what about everybody else? The existing team? How do you figure out who needs training and what kind? Well, for that, you need a strategic blueprint.
This right here is probably the single most important question a manager can ask when someone on their team is underperforming. Because the biggest mistake you can make is just assuming that training is always the answer. The first, absolutely critical step is what's called a performance analysis. You have to diagnose the root cause of the problem.
And the core of that diagnosis comes down to this. Is it a can't-do problem or a won't-do problem? A can't-do problem is about skill. The person literally lacks the training or the tools, or maybe the instructions were just unclear. Training can fix that. But a won't-do problem? That's about motivation. The employee could do the job, they just don't. And training is not going to fix a motivation gap. You need to look at things like incentives. If you get this diagnosis wrong, all your training money is just going right down the drain.
And, getting this stuff right isn't just about performance. It can be a serious legal issue. There's a concept called negligent training. Basically, it means if you fail to train an employee properly, and because of that they end up harming someone else, the company can be held responsible. It just highlights why effective training isn't optional, it's crucial.
So, let's say you've done your analysis and you've determined that training is the right solution. Now what? How do you actually deliver it? Well, the methods for doing that have evolved like crazy. We're going to look at the huge shift from old school lectures to modern microlearning.
We've all seen this picture, right? The classic lecture in a stuffy conference room. And look, it can be a quick and simple way to get information out there. But today, it's just one small tool in a much bigger, much more exciting toolkit. And here is the complete opposite end of that spectrum. Just try to wrap your head around Uber's challenge. They have to train more than 150,000 new drivers every single week. You can't put them in a lecture hall. So the solution has to be different. Their training is online, it's on demand, and it's delivered in these little tiny digestible pieces, what we call microlearning, that a driver can access right on their phone whenever they need it.
And that gives you a taste of the whole modern training toolkit. I mean, you've got amazing stuff like simulated learning. The Cheesecake Factory literally uses a video game to teach new chefs how to build one of their giant perfect hamburgers layer by layer. You've got virtual classrooms for live interactive learning from anywhere, mobile learning for that just-in-time info. And one of my favorites, behavior modeling. It's so simple but so powerful. You show someone the right way to do it, you let them practice, and you give them feedback.
Okay, but after all of this, the thoughtful onboarding, the careful analysis, the cool high-tech training, there is one question left. It's the one that every executive, every CEO always asks. Did it actually work? It's time to prove the payoff.
So how do you actually prove it worked? Well, the gold standard, the most rigorous way, is to run a controlled experiment. Think of it like a science experiment for business. You take two similar groups of employees, you train one of them, the trained group, but not the other, the control group. Then you compare their performance. That's how you can isolate the impact of the training itself and prove it was the training, not something else, that made the difference. Now, even if you can't run a full-blown experiment, you can still evaluate training on 4 key levels, and each one gets deeper and more meaningful. Level 1 is reaction. Pretty simple. Did people like the training? Level 2 is learning. Okay, did they actually absorb the information? Level 3 is behavior. This is a big one. Are they actually using their new skills back at their desk? And the holy grail, level 4, is results. Did our training actually move the needle on real business outcomes? And here is a fantastic, real-world example of measuring those level 4 results. MGM Resorts rolled out a new training program for their hotel managers. And what happened? They saw a 2% rise in their Net Promoter Score. That's a crucial metric that measures how likely a guest is to recommend the hotel to a friend. That is a hard, tangible business result that proves the training paid for itself and then some.
And that really brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. It's pretty easy to spend money on training. It's a lot harder to prove it was money well spent. So ask yourself this. If you are going to launch a new training initiative tomorrow in your company or your team, what is the one single result, the one metric you would track to prove, without a doubt, that it actually paid off?